Hello, everyone, and welcome in to this week's edition of GC Live Foul Balls. As always, I am your host, Intern Joe. Joined with me, my co-host, Mr. Jack Veltri. Jack, how was your weekend? How you doing?
It was good, man. It was good. Obviously, disappointing weekend for the Gamecocks, but not too bad for me. I went to go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yesterday.
Oh, that's
So,
sweet. How
yeah,
was it?
no spoilers. It was really good. It kind of subverted my expectations in a good way.
That's good.
But yeah, man, I'd give it probably an 8 out of 10,
We
honestly.
love
So,
that. We
yeah,
know you're a big Marvel guy, so that's a good rating. I'm a big Guardians of the Galaxy guy, so I'm
yeah,
glad
man.
that
Yeah, man.
worked out.
But yeah, go see it if you haven't yet. But anyway, um,
Absolutely. Sounds like
yeah,
a fun weekend.
yeah, but other than that, disappointing weekend for the Gamecocks, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're about as banged up as one team could be. Rough, very rough weekend in Lexington, and we will get to that. But first, Jack, let's talk about our presenting sponsor, our good friend over at the Movement Mortgage Network, Mr. Clint Hammond. As I'm trying to pull up his the ad real quick, or I'll just read it. I can't find it.
And Bob.
So our good friend Clint Hammond. If you're in need and help with your mortgage, call our good friend Clint Hammond at the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer. Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance, nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with five-star customer service. He's even helped our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback and my post-game co-host Perry Orth with their mortgages. Give our guy Clint a call. His number is at the top of the screen, 803-771-6933. Once again, that's 803-771-6933. Give Clint a call for all of your mortgage needs. So, Jack, getting into it, you dropped all three against Kentucky in a pretty ugly way. I guess give me your initial thoughts of what you saw from the boys out in Lexington.
Yeah, it was definitely a continuation of last week. I think just on a much higher scale. You're facing a good team on the road, and you really just weren't in it at all this series. Kentucky just always seemed to strike first and often. And sure, South Carolina did their best to make a comeback, but just anytime they do so, it was just Kentucky answering right back immediately. And it was just I think it was probably the worst weekend of the season for this team. And it's the funny thing about it is I saw it yesterday on Twitter. I think there was only one team that won a series on the road yesterday or this past weekend, and it was Arkansas. They won in Starkville, and they swept that series. Every other team, LSU lost their series against I can't remember who, but they lost their series to Auburn. Sorry, and Auburn's been riding high lately, man. They've been looking a lot better. And then you got Vanderbilt losing their series to Alabama, Alabama's been going through it this week, man. I don't know if you've seen it, but with their coach getting fired and stuff, that's pretty crazy that they
Yeah,
were able to pull off that series at home. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, it's just crazy that people might be overreacting right now. South Carolina's lost 5 out of their last 6 in the SEC, but
Mhm.
the SEC at this point it's just a gauntlet. I mean,
It
it's
is.
especially on the road. Like it doesn't matter where you play, who you're going up against. What doesn't matter what time of year it is. You really have to bring your best in order to win these series. And South Carolina, I mean, they just really fell flat this weekend, and they paid the price for it. And hats off to Kentucky. They did everything that South Carolina had been doing pretty well most of the year, and they exposed South Carolina in a big way. So it's not the end of the world right now because you still have a long way to go. All their goals are still out in front of them. They're still in the top 10, can still contend for that national seed that everyone keeps talking about and home field advantage and all that. But I think at some point you do want to be able to turn it around before you get to the postseason and all that. And this team is more than capable of doing so. They're just really banged up right now and stuff. But yeah, just I think the biggest thing I noticed is that the pitching just wasn't good again this weekend. Arguably probably
We'll
worse
get
than
into that.
weekend.
Believe me, we will get into that. Yeah, I mean, I agree fully. I think it's you talk about the injuries. This team is so banged up. It's a shell of itself. And Kentucky's a really good team. They're in the top 5 in the RPI. I believe they are up to 1 this week after that weekend sweep. So Kentucky's not a bad ball club. I think it's the same thing that goes with the Auburn team. You get a good ball club at home coming off of a bunch of injuries and after getting shelled at home against Auburn, a good Auburn ball club. I think, you got to find a way to kickstart momentum. I personally, I thought the game in Rock Hill would be a little bit of a momentum kickstarter, but certainly wasn't the case. And again, like we've kind of overused it already to this point. The show just started, but Kentucky's a really good ball club, and when you're as hurt as you are, it's just going to happen. It's baseball. When you're missing that many guys, that much firepower in your lineup, it doesn't matter, if you're hitting the home run or not. It's just not going to go your way, especially in the SEC, like you said, Jack. But getting into the injuries, quick injury report before we, as I'm sure everyone's wondering. So going down the list here, we've got Wimmer, LeCroy, McGillis, the big 3 bats in the lineup that are arguably some of the bigger pieces that everyone's kind of looking for. McGillis coming back. McGillis is coming back possibly Tuesday, along with LeCroy per Coach Kingston. Wimmer, no sign of him playing on Tuesday or not, if I'm correct there, Jack.
I don't think you're going to expect to see him till at earliest this weekend. It was always a 2-week thing with Wimmer, kind of similar to Talon LeCroy, because the injury happened in that game 2 of the Auburn series. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm 99% positive on that. And the hamstring's like a 2-week thing, so he would be on track to be playing at Arkansas at some point this weekend. But again, I mean, hamstrings are like a big issue. I mean, there's not. I don't know. I mean, it could be a longer time frame. It could be short. I mean, best case scenario though, I think, is this weekend he'll be playing. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And again, with Wimmer, you just want him in the lineup. He's a bat, and he does a lot for morale. He's kind of a captain figure. I think, Wimmer's one of those guys that you need back. McGillis, everyone's been waiting for to come back. He's been out the longest. I think, he was red hot when he did exit the lineup with the injury. So I'm most excited to see McGillis. And then you also have Jerzenbeck, who left the game this weekend. I believe it was on Saturday. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it was yesterday. It was Sunday.
So it was yesterday's game. Jerzenbeck left. I believe, according to Collyn Taylor, was emotional in the dugout. Did not feel good.
Sanders gave him a hug on the way in. I mean, you hope it's not TJ. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's like worst case scenario, I think. But I mean, we'll see. I doubt he's pitching tomorrow. There's no reason he should.
No.
I think if you don't see him this weekend, and the thing about Mark Kingston is sometimes I feel like it depends on the player, I think, and what the circumstances. He'll give you the direct answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But at other times, it's just kind of like closed off information. Like with Wesley Sweat last year when he was out most of the year, I just remember guys, reporters asking him all the time,
SEC, man.
What's going to happen? What's up with Wesley Sweat? This and that, and just it's vague answers.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of like with Noah Hall now. You just don't know what the case kind of is, and Noah Hall probably not back anytime soon. So if you're the Gamecocks at this point, you're just preparing just for the rest of the year to pitch without him probably.
Yeah.
That would be my thing. But yeah, with Jerzenbeck, I mean, it's kind of up in the air, I guess, at this point. Maybe Collyn will have more information when he pops on later. But
absolutely.
So I think it's kind of a wait and see probably at this point.
I agree. Yeah, and you talk about Noah Hall, no real return in sight for him. Another guy that was red hot going into his injury, and another guy that would be a huge piece. So right now, I guess, I agree. I think you kind of have to brace for Hoover in a way. You just have to take what you've got and also have guys step up too. You really need guys to step up, and they didn't in Kentucky. That's kind of how the series just went. And when you're so banged up, you you would expect the depth to really come and play, but I mean, we just haven't seen it yet. So heading into Arkansas, it's going to be really interesting. But Jack, I mean, obviously there's Tippett and Veach that are banged up too, but should be good to go, right?
You would think so, yeah. I'm not sure about Tippett, but I would think Veach would probably be good to go since his arm was a little sore this past weekend. He didn't pitch at all this weekend, but
Mhm.
one would think he'd probably be good to go
Yeah.
for this upcoming weekend. I think it's at this point it's kind of all hands on deck, and Veach is such a competitor, so I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be pitching. You'd probably have to carry him off the field to be honest, but
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll. It's just this team is very banged up right now, and I think once you get these guys back that have been missing for the past few weeks, I think you will see a different team. The team I think that everyone's kind of been used to this season. Um, but
Mm.
but at the same time, if when they do come back, I wouldn't expect immediate impacts just like what we were seeing before their injuries. Because it takes time to get back into the whole swing of playing 9 inning games and all that. Because there's no rehab outings or anything. You're just kind of thrown back into the fire, especially during the middle of SEC play against what will be a very good Arkansas team. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm most interested to see this weekend is how those guys, if they do come back, how they kind of fare against that pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we'll get into the hypotheticals here a little bit. We've got some questions, I guess, for in terms of what you want to see from South Carolina this weekend in Fayetteville. Certainly like to see a little bit better. But Jack, getting into the offense a little bit here. The offense, I mean, they went deep 4 times. It still wasn't enough. I mean, it was dormant all weekend. And shout out to Gavin Casas because I mean he's back. I mean clearly. I'll get into him in a little bit with in terms of people who stood out, but yeah, I mean Jack, the offense was just not there this weekend.
Yeah, you really well, first off, let me just say Gavin Casas, you really needed him to get back to kind of what he
Yeah,
had been doing this year. I mean, he had a fantastic weekend, arguably the best weekend amongst any South Carolina hitter. He had been slumping, man. I mean, ever since it was like I think it was like that Mississippi State series, he had just been really struggling at the plate with the lung issue and all that. But now I think he's back to being the guy that we all know that can mash any pitch at the plate and hit it a long way. But you really want the rest of the lineup to kind of do the same. It was just a lot of strikeouts again this weekend and not continuing to build off the success they had at the plate at certain points in the game, and it really bit them in the butt. And it didn't help that the pitching wasn't good. I mean, I think when you score, like for instance, on Saturday when they scored 7 runs, that's typically enough to win you a ball game. But
oh, yeah,
when your pitching is giving up 14 runs, I mean, it's pretty hard to win a game at that point. So I think the offense does need to do better, cut down on those strikeouts and continue to just get some hits. And I think this is where you're really missing those guys that have been producing for you all season. But I mean, it's not that shouldn't be an excuse though. At the same time, you need the guys that are in the lineup right now to be able to produce, and some of them are. I mean, we'll get into some of those guys that I think stood out to us this weekend, but you want your whole lineup 1 through 9 to be able to do some damage.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
they just couldn't do so consistently, and it really did show this weekend in Lexington.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess getting into the hitters that stood out, I'll lead off. I already brought him up. Gavin Costas, 5 for 12, 5 hits, 3 home runs, 4 RBIs. It's pretty good in terms of just compared to the rest of the team. I think he's back, safe to say, or at least somewhat of a shade that he of the tear that he was on early on in the season. If you can have even glimpses of that, you're going to find success. But I mean, obviously, the rest is the lineup wasn't as great. But yeah, I mean, if you can have glimpses of that consistently down the stretch, especially, I mean, you look ahead to Hoover too, just couple games like that down the stretch when it's crunch time from Gavin Costas goes a long, long, long way in this lineup. So good for him. I'm glad he's back, and that's why he's my hitter of the series / somebody who stood out to me this weekend in Lexington.
Good choice. Good choice. You made the really safe pick, I think.
I
But
did, absolutely.
yeah. Now, obviously, like I said, there's kind of just a lot of guys that just aren't really doing well in this lineup right now. But there are a few that do stand out. I think you're still continuing to get at the top of the order, especially right now with Wimmer and guys like that out. McGillis, you're getting Michael Braswell and Dylan Brewer hitting fairly well at the line in this line. I mean, they had a hit in each of the games this weekend. With Braswell, he went 5 for 13 and he had two multi-hit games and only had one RBI. But again, it's that he's continuing to hit good and he's doing it against SEC pitching, which is a big jump from last year, as I've talked about many times before on the show. And then another thing, I know this isn't hitting, but his defense wasn't too bad this weekend. He didn't have an error in the field, which is really good to see. It's good to see that he's able to field any position that he's really at right now.
Mhm.
And that's really a good sign. And I think he's honestly done such a solid job filling in for all the guys that are hurt in this infield. And you need someone like that that can be the guy that steps up at any moment when someone's going to get hurt, and that's going to be really crucial down the stretch. Now, with Dylan Brewer, he had an awesome weekend. I think not as good as Braswell, I wouldn't say, but his big day was Sunday. He homered and drove in 2 runs on that bomb to right field, and he
Mhm.
went 4 for 11. So I think he's continuing to solidify himself as your pretty much everyday one of your everyday outfielders, whether it's center field or left field. Uh, that is doesn't really matter. He'll be out there pretty much the rest of the way, I would think, barring any injuries. But yeah, at one point, I mean, this was pretty much a two-legged race with him and Evan Stone. But I
Yeah,
think when you're
yeah,
fully healthy and you have everyone out there, all 9 stars, I think Dylan Brewer easily gets the edge over Evan Stone right now.
yeah, just the way he's been hitting for sure.
Yeah. And that's not a knock on Evan Stone. I think he's a fine player. He fields his, we all know he fields his position really well, but his bat is not as good as Brewer's by any means. And in the SEC, you need guys that can hit and can score runs. So I think Brewer at the top of the lineup can really do some damage. Him and Braswell have been a nice 1-2 punch in that lineup.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you want to go to pitching and defense?
Yeah, man. Yeah, let's cut right back into it because I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about the pitching this weekend.
It's not great, Jack. Not a
It's not.
great weekend
Uh,
for pitching and defense. I mean, you had, oh gosh, as I do the quick math, I should have done this.
you gave up 30 runs this week.
30 runs, yes.
30 runs. That's not
It's not great.
in
It's an
maybe
average of 10 per game for anyone who's
maybe
wondering.
maybe in some bizarre world that will win you a game if you have like an elite offense, but when your offense isn't clicking all the time, you're not winning many games. And like I said before, you scored 7 runs on Saturday. That should be enough to win you a game,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it wasn't. And that was the most runs they gave up this weekend,
Mhm.
14. So um I think we'll just start straight with the pitching, I think, or starting pitching, I should say. Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Started pitching.
I think I can't remember what we both said last week, but I think we both thought that the starting pitching would look a bit better this weekend because
Yes. Some shade of better.
yeah, because I mean they struggled against Auburn really badly, and they had
Mhm.
just all pitched really good against Florida 2 weeks ago. But now you're kind of back to that point where it's like nobody's clicking right now, and that stinks because you at least want one guy to be on, but it's just none of them were really pitching well this weekend at all. And I think surprisingly, I think Will Sanders probably had the best outing out of the three of them.
Yep.
But
And
then again,
that's saying a lot.
yeah, but then again, none of them gave you length. I mean, Will Sanders went 5 innings, but he had 4 runs, which isn't it's oh, look, for a one, just in general, I think it's not good. But
Mhm.
for his circumstances of just where how bad I don't really want to knock on the guy, but like how bad he's kind of been this season, I think is a big step forward for him. Because ideally, I think you want him to be throwing, 7 innings of shutout ball, maybe giving up 1 or 2 runs, but he really just hasn't been like that at all this year. So maybe it's just a sign that he'll figure it out and get things going forward. But then the other two in the rotation, I mean, man, Jack Mahoney, I mean, he really got roughed up this weekend. I think he's taken just a kind of a step back since what he's been accustomed to doing this season. I mean, we know what all these guys can do, but especially Mahoney. I mean, he's got the big strikeout numbers, but man, he just is rough these last two outings. And then Matthew Becker, I mean, me personally, I've been pretty high on him. I think we know he's got the stuff, just like everyone else, to be a solid starter in the SEC. But it's just the little things. It's the walks. It's the errors. It's the things that you can't get out of innings. It's stuff like that that's really, I think, preventing him from being a guy that we can talk about every week and confidently thinking, okay, we know if we're in a jam and we need someone to get us out of it, it's going to be Matthew Becker. But right now, it's just he hasn't really proven that. And I think when it comes down to it, he will be able to be a good guy to help you out, winning these games and stuff as a starter. But right now, it's just looking a little bleak. And again, you're really missing Noah Hall. I think South Carolina's rotation went from being one of the best in the SEC to right now it's just got a lot of question marks, and that's not really a good thing to have this late in the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, your starting pitching was not good by any means. Just going out on a limb here, Jack, and saying it. Yeah, Will Sanders, it's crazy that we're saying that he was the best one. Last week, I know we were talking about, how this week was going to be better for him. And maybe, Auburn was kind of a just bump in the road and he'd be back to the Will Sanders that he'd been building up to be. But, I mean, this week was more of the same from him. The amount of times that we've sat here and said that, he's been elite versus times where, he's been like this. I don't know what to call this, bad, average. I don't know. But it's averaging out. He's 4-3 as a starter. And then he's got 18 earned runs in his last 14 in his last 3. It's not great from him as of late. And I mean, we'll get to some hypotheticals later on. What do you do with him? I mean, do you move him? Do you not? Do you trust him? So we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, Sanders, not great as of late. Mahoney, I mean, I think this is just an off week from him. The Auburn series, again, wasn't good for anybody, really. And just another week of the same from Jack. It was just kind of, I don't know, not great. But I think Mahoney's proved to us more than Sanders has that, this is just going to be an off week for him. And I get being on the road is tough. So we'll see what happens with Jack in the Arkansas series. I think it's going to be quite interesting considering this last week's appearance. And then, yeah, my final thoughts on Becker, or at least the starters here. Becker he has proven to be your guy that's going to step in for Hall. And I think, this weekend he was just as good as everyone else, as Sanders, as Mahoney was. So if you're looking for like continuity, I guess you got it in a way. Again, not great from Becker. 4 innings pitched, 5 hits, 5 runs, 3 earned, 5 walks, and 4 strikeouts. Pretty darn, decent in terms of, the rest of the starting pitching. But again, not great. And I mean, one thing they did do was they found a way to get out of the first inning with not a whole lot of harm. I mean, they didn't really score more than 2 or 3 in the first inning, if I'm correct. But and that was like a correction from last weekend. Is you want to see him get out of the first inning, but they did just not. Again, it's not perfection, not what you were looking for. And then again, later on in their starts, they all started to fall apart at the seams there. So some hypotheticals on what we can do with what they can do with the rotation. We'll preview that in our Arkansas segment, but. Yeah, I mean, the bullpen wasn't great either. James Hicks getting the start tomorrow in the midweek game. He wasn't great. But there's a lot of guys. And I did the math today. There were only 3 pitchers that didn't allow a run this weekend. And one of them being Eli Jersenbeck, who, again, left the game because of his injury and stuff. But, yeah, not great at all by any means whatsoever. But, Jack, we'll get to if we should change up the rotation. But give me first, who stood out to you on the mound this week?
Yeah, like you just said, there's really, really not a ton of guys to pick from right now. Like you said, only three guys pitched one or whatever scoreless innings. My guy would probably be Wesley Sweat.
Mhm.
I mean, not a ton of options to pick from, but I think he looked really good this weekend. He only threw one inning on Friday, but it was kind of garbage time at that point. But still, I mean, every time you get to pitch in one of these games is always important, especially for a guy like that who, I mean, people forget. I mean, he was a pretty good pitcher last season before he got hurt. Um, Big arm late down the stretch. So I think getting him more accustomed to these big spots again, he can be a nice weapon to have if you're really in a pinch and more guys get hurt. Because at this point, anyone could really get hurt, and you're going to need guys like that to step up. And I mean, his ERA right now is 2.5, so I think it's a lot more impressive than I probably would have thought if I didn't know anything about him right now. But yeah, I think that's probably the guy who stands out to me. What you got?
No, I mean, just kind of closing it down. It's with pitching this bad, I guess, it is baseball, right? You're going to Arkansas. It's a new place. It's kind of a new week. And overall, I think, when you're not hitting the ball well, you're not getting that run support like they're used to early on in games. I think it definitely takes a toll on you as a pitcher for sure. Like when you're not getting that kind of backup from your bats when the bats aren't there. You're really struggling to stay in games, and that's kind of when you get loose and the hits and the runs come. So I think overall you just got to get better on both sides of the spectrum here. But Jack, you want to talk about our other partner, Liberty Tax? Tell the people about
I
our
sure would. All right.
friends.
Yeah, so Taxity is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. But on the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 weekdays and 9 to 5 Saturdays. There are multiple service options. Start through Liberty Tax mobile app or through desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. You can give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. And that number on screen is 803-462-5576. Again, 803-462-5576. Give Liberty Tax a call for any of your tax needs. You're on mute, buddy.
Yep. I
It's all good.
had a lighting problem there and had to fix that real quick. But
Yeah.
Liberty Tax, give them a call if you're still trying to tune up some tax needs. As we know, tax season was in April. But getting into it, big boy series on the road this weekend at Arkansas. Tough sledding in Fayetteville recently, as they are 36-12, 17-7 in the SEC. They've been really good recently, especially at home. Jack, I guess give me initially, what are you seeing from Arkansas, and what are you looking forward to seeing South Carolina, have matchup wise?
You kind of just hit on the nail on the head there, man. Arkansas is just really good this season. They've just been really good at home, like you said. They're coming off a sweep of Mississippi State, which I think everyone's just piling it on Mississippi State this season, even South Carolina earlier in the year. But yeah, I mean, but the thing about Arkansas is, I mean, just like any other team in this conference, there have been rough patches. I mean, they got swept by Georgia a few weeks back, and South Carolina swept Georgia to start the SEC play. So anything can really happen in this league. It wouldn't shock me if Arkansas lost a series or South Carolina got swept. I mean, you really never know at this point. But I think Arkansas just has been really consistent this season, like you said. They've got some good hitters on this team. Not too bad at pitching. Their ace, Hagen Smith, is 7-1. with a 2.5 ERA, 79 strikeouts. So, I mean, it's another weekend for South Carolina where they got to face the top tier teams in this conference. And
Yeah.
I think what I said last week is you kind of want to go 3-3 over these next 2 weekends with Kentucky and Arkansas, and then you get ready for Tennessee next weekend. But now you kind of got to go sweep in order to make that point proven.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think just at least you want to take 2 out of 3. I think that is the ultimate goal right now, especially with everyone kind of getting more healthy. But we'll see what happens. It should be an interesting weekend, but at the same time, just I'm a little cautious to see what this team can do against South Carolina.
Yeah, Arkansas baseball has been really, 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 really good at home. I had the numbers there real quickly. Let's see. So yeah, they're 28-3 at home. That's pretty darn good. So it's a tough place to win at. And coming off of getting swept at Kentucky, I think you'd need a little home cooking before you get things rolling. If you're South Carolina, granted, North Florida is a Tuesday. That game's at home, correct?
Yep.
So yeah, you get the midweek at home, which should do some things for morale. Again, you got some guys working back, rehab, whatnot. Get that all out of the way, and then you take it full head of steam into Arkansas. Arkansas, when I was looking at them, their outfield hits the cover off the ball. They have 2 guys that really stood out to me. Jace Brofriend, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but he's hitting 366, 13 homers, 44 RBIs and 60 hits. That's pretty darn good. And then again, in left, you got Jared Wagner, 351 with 12 homers, 44 RBIs, and 37 hits. Those guys have been virtually unstoppable for Arkansas. Their bats are at the heart of the order. They're really, really, really clutch hitters too for them. So a lot riding on the South Carolina starting pitching to be able to shut them down. I think it's very, very big. And their pitching wise, they've been using 3 guys mostly the entire year. Will McIntyre. I mean, you brought up Hagen Smith, who is going to cause some trouble. I believe he'll start the Friday game. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week, right, Jack?
I believe so.
Yeah. So yeah, Smith will start the Sunday or the Friday game, and then you should have Will McIntyre 6-2, 5.6 ERA with 54 strikeouts on Saturday, and then Hunter Holland 6-2, 4.15 ERA and 51 strikeouts. So next to Hagen Smith, you got 2 guys that are kind of carbon copies of each other. So you really, really, really need to knock those guys out of the game and get to the bullpen. And it's something that we've seen South Carolina do so well leading up to this point in the season, up until this rough patch. Excuse me. And so you got to get pitchers out early. You got to get to the bullpen. They did it so well against Florida, and I'm not really sure why it's kind of been lost on them recently. Starters have been staying in the game for a good amount of time and shutting them down. So something I at least want to see is getting the starting pitching out of the game and then continuing to ride that momentum, through the bullpen. So that's pretty much, all of Arkansas. Getting into some South Carolina questions here. Jack, how do you carry some momentum from a midweek game or any momentum from this Kentucky series, if there is any? How do you carry that, into Fayetteville for this Arkansas series?
I'll be honest. I don't think you really. You'll get the midweek game tomorrow, so that is probably the only slightest bit of momentum that you have, assuming you win that game. You never know right now with the way they're playing, but I think they'll be fine. Probably win tomorrow. That said, I think instead of momentum, I think it's just do better. That's kind of just what you got to do. I think this team can definitely turn it around. I think at this point, it's just kind of just flipping the switch. I think this team, when they get healthy, they'll be fine. But at some point, you really do need to play better. Pitching wise, you need to hit better as well. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is just do your job, and I think the rest will take care of itself. And like you said before, you're right about the after Smith, those next 2 guys, you need to get through them quickly and then get to Arkansas's bullpen. But at the same time, it really won't matter if you do that if you're not pitching well if you're South Carolina. Because, you could be – it's just like this weekend. You could be hitting the ball all over the place, but it doesn't matter if your pitching will not do a thing for you. So I think what you really want to see is just Will Sanders get back to form. And then after that, you want to see Jack and Becker follow suit and do what they need to do in order to give South Carolina a chance this weekend. I think that's kind of going to be the X factor is can your starting pitching do what we know it can do? They have all the potential in the world to be a top 5 rotation in college baseball, but right now they are pitching like one of the worst in college baseball. So I think if you can get ideally, I think you'd want to see 6 innings out of each of them. But
Mhm.
realistically, I think I'm going to say you need 5 innings out of Becker and Mahoney with maybe 2 or less runs given up. And then with Will Sanders, I think you want to see at least 6 innings of maybe 2 or 3 run ball. If they can do all that, that is a marginal improvement in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I think just we'll see what happens. It wouldn't shock me if they got roughed up again, but at the same time, I think we know what they got, what they can do, and this is the kind of the series to prove that you're still one of the best teams in the country. So we'll
Yeah,
see what happens.
absolutely. I agree completely. I mean, I think, we've seen both ends of the spectrum for where this team is at this season. Their potential, at least, or I think we've gotten a glimpse of their potential. I don't think we've seen it fully, but we've gotten a pretty good idea. So going off of that, I mean, I think, these are the bumps in the road. Unfortunately for South Carolina, they've been happening, now kind of as the season sputters to a halt. But I guess it's better now than at the very end when you're talking about Hoover and playoffs. I mean, getting close to it, but I think this is, a matter of the road mumps and whatnot. You got to go on the road at Arkansas. So again, I think it is baseball. At the end of the day, you do just have to play better. But I mean, right now with all the injuries and everything, it's really, really, really tough to get everybody on the same page, everybody playing, the same brand of baseball. So it's tough to capitalize off of momentum when you really don't have any to kind of move forward with. Jack, speaking of the injured guys, though, what's one injured player that could possibly return this week/weekend that would make the most impact in your mind?
I just think, I mean, you really could pick honestly anyone at this point,
Mhm.
and I think they'd be a substantial. I don't want to say upgrade because you've got a lot of guys playing well that have been filling in for them, but a um a boost in morale, I think, is
Mhm.
kind of the way I would word it. If I had to pick one guy that would really be beneficial to coming back this weekend, I think I'd have to go either Braylon Wimmer or Will McGillis. But if I'm picking
Mhm.
one, I'm probably going Will McGillis right now. That's probably the weird pick, but I think just the way he was hitting, man, he was hitting so well before the injury. I mean, I think the last thing we saw of him was he hit a grand slam against LSU in that rout on that magical Friday night for the South Carolina faithful. But just he's really been an impactful transfer bat in this lineup, and you really are missing him at second base. So I think getting him back is just as important as Braylon Wimmer. You obviously want both back playing as well as they can, but if I had to pick one that would really be beneficial to this team, not to say Braylon Wimmer is a slouch by any means, he's probably better than Will McGillis, but you really want to see Will McGillis get back in this lineup ASAP.
Yeah, that's a good take. I'm going to go with the opposite there. I'm going with Wimmer. I think you need obviously morale and whatnot. I think Wimmer's been waiting to get his bat back for a good amount of time. We saw it do well. I mean, a little bit in Florida, but talk about it unsung hero. I think Wimmer's one of those guys that you get him back in the lineup, and I think things start to go, your way a little bit more. You need a leader out there. You need somebody to, kind of put their foot down and stop this losing skid. So I think Wimmer's the one guy that I say, would make an impact. I don't necessarily know if it's going to make a big impact on, the series as a whole, but I think, if you do want to not get swept again, Wimmer's the guy that you would want back. But I also think Leroy can make some ground. I think he can, make a big impact as well. Another underrated bat in the lineup. I know McGillis is, the flashy player that everyone does want back, but I think it starts with Wimmer, and then you go McGillis, and then Leroy too, not to be outshined by any of them. But I think that's, kind of at least the breakdown of who you would want to see more. Jack, quickly before we do predictions, how do you get things back on track for South Carolina? What do you have to do to, get things going again besides play better, obviously, because we've been over that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say probably play better, but I think just you really need to just show some life, have some energy, and do what you do best, man. Just hit the ball out of the yard and go back to that and just let it carry you this weekend. I think we know how much this team loves hitting home runs, and I think you really want to see more of that this weekend. I think the
Mhm.
only glimpse of it we really saw last week was at Winthrop. I know we really haven't touched on the midweek game at all, but it wasn't until the seventh inning where South Carolina finally showed some life. They hit 3 homers in the seventh, uh, and they just it carried them the rest of the way. So I think you need that kind of big inning per se early on in one of these games to get you kind of going, with or without. I guess with the home run, honestly. If not, do what you got to do, driving the ball, driving runs in with singles and doubles and all that stuff. But I think just scoring some runs early would be great, and then that kind of they'll play with a lot of energy after that. So I think just do stuff like that, and I think it'll really go a long way this weekend, regardless of kind of what happens score
Okay.
wise.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think obviously play better, but you do need to get back to your roots. You do need the long ball, especially in a place like Arkansas. That place will eat you up and swallow you whole if you're not on your toes. I think the pitching needs to be better. You need just couple run difference from the pitchers, right? You can't let it get out of hand early. We talked about that first inning last week. It's gotten better. It needs to get even better if you want to beat a team like Arkansas. Again, I think the bats. No matter who you get back, you have to hit the ball, put the ball in play. You'd like to see more home runs, to your point, Jack. But I think just putting the ball in play and capitalizing off it. I know Braswell's clutch gene is up. It hasn't been that great recently, but you want to see that out of some guys. You want to see the fight that's there from your depth guys. If you don't get as many guys back this weekend as you expected, you want to see that fight. You want to see that dog, because when the depth guys are showing the dog, they're showing all the fight in the world, whatever, and still clawing, scratching, trying to get back in games and whatnot. It gives the starters, when they do get back, it gives them that much more incentive to play better, because one, those guys are playing well better. And two, that if they're going to be fighting that hard when they get their chance, it just moves you to fight even harder. And so if that made sense, yeah,
It
so
made
it did. All right, good. I'm glad. It was a little bit of a rant there, but getting into it, looking at our predictions this week, Jack, how will South Carolina fare at Arkansas this weekend?
Originally I was gonna have South Carolina lose 2 out of 3. Shoot, I even thought about them probably getting swept. But after all this talk, I think just at some point, right? They got to turn it around at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of I hate to be that dude. I'm buying into it, man. I am gonna be suckered into South Carolina playing better this weekend. I'm picking them to win 2 out of 3. I'm mainly just riding on the fact that look, I think they're probably gonna lose Friday. I'll just get that out of the way. I don't think Will Sanders will fully turn it around yet, if I'm being quite honest. However, I do think Saturday and Sunday, you're facing much weaker pitching against Arkansas, and I think just you got to get something better from Mahoney. I think you will. I think Becker's going to be better this weekend. I think the bullpen's going to step up, and I think when you get these guys back in the lineup, if it is this weekend, that's kind of also what I'm riding it on. If as long as you get these guys back, I think you win 2 out of 3 this weekend. So yeah, give me South Carolina win Saturday and Sunday, and take the series and kind of get this ship back on course.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that pick. And apologies for my fridge; it is going off currently. But yeah, no. So my prediction, I think, depending on who you get back, I think it really does. Depending on how many you get back, how many bats. I'm talking about Wimmer, Lee Croy, and McGillis. I think if you get two of them back, great. I think you do. You take the series if you get two back. Um, and this is going to sound a little cliche, but depending on how many you get back, is going to be is how my math added up is how many games you're going to get. So say you get one guy back, I think you're going to get one game. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but if see what I'm saying in terms of like the platoon and any Talmadge Leroy in the lineup, whether you're DHing him or anything, I think that's a plus. But the pitching just has to be better. But all in all, I think I'm taking Arkansas to go 2 of 3. That's my final prediction for the series. But again, just depends on how many of these guys you get back. We know how mysterious Kingston likes to be with his injuries and stuff like that. So we don't really. My thing is I don't really know how healthy these guys are. I mean, McGillis has been out for what, a month, 2 months, maybe.
Yeah, a month, and then LeCroy. Man, I mean,
yeah,
I think you're definitely right on LeCroy with him being back in any capacity. Really is a good thing. But I think I will say at the same time, I don't think you were there for that or not Arkansas, Auburn series, Joe, in person. I'm sure you watched it on TV. But
yes.
LeCroy, he got one at bat, I think, and he just, I mean, it was a pinch hit appearance. It was late in the game, and he just couldn't even run down to first. And that was last week. So I'm not sure where he's at this upcoming weekend. It'll really be a telltale if he plays tomorrow. But at the same time, I mean, he's got to be able to run down to these bases and stuff. I mean, he can hit a long way, but if he's not able to run, it's kind of going to be trouble. So, yeah, I think you're definitely right, though. As long as you get 2 of these guys back, whoever it is, I think right now, I think you probably want Wimmer and McGillis in the middle of that infield. Then you move Braswell over to third. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Should be quite an interesting series. Unfortunately, we didn't get our guy Collyn Taylor on with us tonight. It stinks, but we should have him on next week, hopefully. But that is everything from us here at Fowl Balls. We will see you guys next week, hopefully with a little bit better of a result to talk about than this last weekend in Lexington. But, we shall see. But anyways, as always, I'm Intern Joe. That's Jack Veltri. Thank you guys for tuning in. Enjoy your Monday night.